It all began on a typical summer afternoon in June 2014. Ryan Carter was outside flying his drone when it unexpectedly malfunctioned, landing in the Wilsons' backyard. What he thought would be a simple retrieval became the start of something that would forever change his life. Martha Wilson, unaware of Ryan's presence, was sunbathing by the pool. She was alone and completely unguarded when Ryan entered her yard to find his drone. He couldn't help but be captivated by the sight of her. Martha, a 65-year-old housewife, had spent over 30 years in this suburban home with her husband Henry Wilson, a 68-year-old retired police officer. Over the years, their once passionate marriage had grown distant, with Henry often away with friends, leaving Martha increasingly lonely. Despite her age, Martha maintained her fitness and appearance, attracting attention even from younger neighbors. Ryan, a 19-year-old recent high school graduate, lived just 2 doors down with his parents and was still uncertain about his future. He never anticipated that a simple act of retrieving his drone would lead to a dangerous connection that would unravel both of their lives. On June 3, 2014, when Ryan's drone crashed into Martha's backyard, he decided to quietly slip in to retrieve it, hoping to go unnoticed. It was a bright, sunny afternoon, and as he approached, he saw Martha by the pool, sunbathing, unaware of his presence. Her appearance was striking, her body toned and youthful for her age, and Ryan found himself unable to look away. Martha, noticing him, didn't react with surprise or embarrassment. Instead, she returned his gaze with a knowing smile, igniting an undeniable spark. After that encounter, their interactions became more deliberate. Martha would find reasons to be outside whenever Ryan passed by, sometimes just standing on her porch and waving or holding his gaze longer than seemed innocent. This subtle exchange grew, drawing Ryan further into a world he had never known. By mid-June, Martha invited him inside. One afternoon, as Ryan walked home from the store, Martha, seated on her porch, called him over for tea. They began with casual small talk, discussing neighborhood life and his plans after graduation. Ryan quickly realized she was different from any older woman he'd known, confident, engaging, and charming. Gradually, the conversation turned more personal, as Martha spoke about her life, her marriage, and her longing for something new and exciting. Ryan was pulled into her world, captivated not just by her beauty, but by her mysterious allure. Ryan found himself increasingly drawn to Martha, who felt worlds apart from the other women in his life. Her mystery and allure made her seem out of reach, yet tantalizingly close. Their encounters grew more frequent, and by June 25th, Ryan was visiting her nearly every day. Martha rarely mentioned her husband Henry, who was often out with friends or busy with errands, leaving their home feeling like it belonged solely to her. When Ryan visited, it became their private sanctuary. On July 1, 2014, their affair had fully taken root. Each afternoon, when Henry was away, Ryan would quietly slip over to Martha's house. Their meetings were kept hidden from the world, a secret routine that only intensified over time. As they spent more time together, Ryan's emotions deepened. He began to believe their connection was genuine, that their age difference didn't matter, and they were truly meant to be. But Martha didn't share his vision. While she enjoyed the attention and excitement of his company, she saw him as a temporary escape from the monotony of her life. She relished the thrill, but she didn't see it as permanent. As Ryan grew more attached, he often talked about his feelings, telling her how deeply he cared and how he wanted to be with her always. His jealousy surfaced whenever she mentioned Henry or her life outside of their meetings. Martha noticed his growing obsession but didn't discourage it, taking pleasure in his devotion and the danger of secrecy. She never intended the affair to become serious, but she let Ryan believe what he wanted, knowing that for her, it was merely a distraction. By mid-July, Ryan's infatuation had only intensified. When they weren't together, he spent hours fantasizing about their next meeting, imagining a future with her. He started to believe they could truly be together, if only Henry were out of the picture. Martha dismissed his fantasies with laughter and gentle reminders that what they shared was fleeting, but Ryan couldn't shake his feelings. As his obsession grew, their meetings became riskier. Martha sensed the mounting danger, but felt unable to step away, too caught up in the excitement. For Ryan, the line between passion and obsession blurred, and he couldn't see that Martha didn't feel the same depth of commitment. By August 10, 2014, Ryan's obsession had reached a disturbing level. His desire for Martha had become all-consuming, and the idea of her with anyone else, especially Henry, was unbearable. Frustrated, he began voicing his feelings more openly, talking about how they could never be truly happy as long as Henry was in the way. His jealousy festered, and he began to press Martha to leave her husband. At first, Martha brushed off these comments. For her, Ryan was just a thrilling distraction, not a serious prospect. She'd never considered leaving Henry, who provided her with a stable life. But as Ryan's insistence grew, his words started to sink in. He became relentless, painting a picture of how much better things could be without Henry. Eventually, he even planted the idea of killing Henry in her mind, suggesting poisoning as a simple, inconspicuous way to do it. Martha was horrified initially, but she found herself considering it more with time. Ryan's idea made it sound so straightforward, and she started to wonder if it was possible. By September 5, 2014, the pressure of their affair was beginning to expose cracks in their carefully maintained facade. That evening, in a seemingly innocent moment, Henry picked up Martha's phone by mistake. What he saw on the screen changed everything, exposing the secrets that would unravel their lives forever. A new message from Ryan flashed on Henry's phone, a message that wasn't subtle. It outlined their plan to poison him, something Henry could never have anticipated. The words cut deep, not just as a threat to his life, but as a betrayal beyond anything he had imagined. His wife of decades, Martha, was conspiring against him with a boy nearly young enough to be her son. Though hurt and shocked, Henry couldn't bring himself to harm her. He still loved her. Instead, he resolved to confront her. That evening, with Martha alone in the house, Henry approached her calmly. Without raising his voice, he laid her phone on the table and asked her to explain. His tone was steady, but his face revealed the heartbreak within. Martha was caught off guard, scrambling to regain control. Knowing there was no easy way to explain, she grew defensive. She tried to deflect, even screaming to make it seem as though Henry was a threat, hoping the neighbors might hear and think he was the aggressor. In the chaos, Henry tried to calm her down, reaching out, but Martha, panicking, stumbled. The living room was cramped with furniture, and as she tried to back away, she tripped and struck her head against the sharp edge of the coffee table. Blood started to flow from a deep wound, staining the carpet beneath her. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Henry stood there, shocked, as Martha lay on the floor, her blood pooling around her. He couldn't move, paralyzed by disbelief as her life slowly slipped away. As Martha's breathing faded, Henry remained in the room, dazed and unable to process what had happened. The room was silent except for the ticking clock. Hours passed, but he couldn't bring himself to call for help, sitting motionless beside her lifeless body, still in shock. By the time the reality of the situation began to settle in, it was too late. Martha was gone, and he knew there would be consequences. The life they had built, however flawed, was shattered by betrayal, jealousy, and a single moment of panic that could never be undone. The next morning, on September 6, 2014, Ryan became worried when Martha didn't respond to his messages. She would usually reply immediately, especially on weekends when Henry was out. But his phone remained silent, filling him with dread. By afternoon, his concern had grown, and unable to wait any longer, he decided to contact the police, saying he hadn't heard from her and was worried. When officers arrived at the Wilson house that evening, they found a chilling scene. Henry was still seated in the living room, detached, his expression vacant. Martha's body lay just a few feet away, with a pool of dried blood beneath her head. The police quickly took control, questioning Henry, who spoke almost mechanically. He kept saying it had been an accident, that he hadn't meant for things to end like this. By September 7, 2014, the police launched a full investigation into Martha's death. Henry was taken into custody, insisting the events had been unintended. However, as detectives probed deeper, they discovered troubling details. Martha's phone held messages revealing not only her affair with Ryan, but also the disturbing plan to poison Henry. The messages painted a much darker story than Henry's account of a simple accident. Ryan's involvement was quickly established through the text conversations. His growing obsession, jealousy, and the plan to eliminate Henry became evident in their exchanges. Ryan was questioned, and though he attempted to downplay his role, the evidence was overwhelming. He couldn't deny the part he had played in suggesting Henry's elimination. As the investigation continued, more details surfaced about the affair. Neighbors began to share strange observations, recalling seeing Martha and Ryan together at unusual hours and suspecting an inappropriate relationship. With each revelation, the story unraveled further. A tale of betrayal, obsession, and a deadly plan that had escalated beyond anyone's control. By September 20, 2014, detectives had pieced together the majority of the case, revealing the complex and tragic web that had ultimately led to Martha's death. While Henry may not have intended to harm Martha that night, his actions ultimately led to her tragic death. The heated confrontation, Martha's accidental fall, and Henry's failure to call for help all contributed to the outcome. Because of this, Henry was charged with involuntary manslaughter. Though he had not planned her death, the situation had spiraled, and his inaction in those critical moments sealed her fate. Ryan, on the other hand, faced much more serious charges. The messages he exchanged with Martha left no doubt about his role in plotting Henry's murder. His repeated encouragements for Martha to leave Henry, combined with the grim plan to poison him, made his involvement undeniable. Ryan was charged with attempted murder for his role in the plot. By late September, the media caught wind of the scandal, and the story quickly made headlines across the state. The age gap between Martha and Ryan added an extra layer of intrigue. A 65-year-old housewife involved in a dangerous affair with her 19-year-old neighbor shocked people far and wide. Infidelity, attempted murder, and a plot to get rid of an unsuspecting husband made for sensational news. Those who had known the Wilsons couldn't fathom how it had come to this. Martha had always been viewed as respectable, while Henry, a retired officer, was well liked in the community. Now, however, the truth had emerged, revealing a dark side to this seemingly ordinary couple. As the case went to trial, Henry and Ryan found themselves under intense public scrutiny. Henry's defense team argued that he had never intended harm, and Ryan's involvement in the murder plot was laid bare for the court to see. In the end, both would face justice, though the court treated them differently based on their roles in the tragedy. Henry's defense presented him as a man overwhelmed by betrayal and shock, emphasizing the disturbing discovery of his wife's affair and the plot to kill him. The prosecution, however, highlighted his failure to call for help as Martha lay dying. Although the death was unintentional, they argued that Henry's negligence played a significant role. On October 15, 2014, Henry received an 8-month prison sentence for involuntary manslaughter. The judge took into account his lack of intent and cooperation with the investigation, but could not overlook that Henry had done nothing to save Martha. For Henry, even a short sentence was a devastating blow. He had lost his wife, his reputation, and now his freedom, even if briefly. Ryan, however, received a much harsher punishment. The court had little sympathy for him, as his role in the murder plot was undeniable. The prosecution painted him as a young man consumed by jealousy and obsession. The messages detailing his encouragement to poison Henry left no doubt of his guilt. His obsession with Martha, who only saw him as a fleeting thrill, had driven him to destruction. On November 10, 2014, Ryan was sentenced to 7 years in prison for attempted murder. The judge acknowledged his youth but emphasized the gravity of his actions. Ryan had not only engaged in an illicit affair, but actively encouraged Martha to kill her husband. His obsession had blinded him, and now he would pay the price. Throughout the trial, the case continued to capture the media's attention. The affair between an older woman and a young man, the murder plot, and Martha's tragic end became infamous. The neighborhood where Henry and Martha had once lived transformed into a symbol of hidden secrets and the dark potential lurking in quiet communities. By December 1, 2014, Both Henry and Ryan were serving their sentences, and the media coverage gradually faded. However, the aftermath left deep scars. Henry, despite serving only a short sentence, would never fully recover from the loss of his wife and his tarnished reputation. Upon release, he moved away, unable to bear the memories of his old life. Ryan's life, too, was forever changed. His youthful obsession had taken him down a path he never anticipated, and his prison sentence forced him to confront the reality of his actions. 7 years behind bars would give him ample time to reflect on the choices that led him here, but by the time he was released, his life would be unrecognizable. This case serves as a warning about how quickly fascination can turn into dangerous obsession. Ryan's infatuation with Martha led him to unimaginable consequences, while Martha's desire for excitement cost her everything. For more true crime stories about how love can turn lethal, follow our channel and stay tuned for daily updates on the dark side of human nature.